will be a 6-minute speech. My judges are ready? My opponent? Great, let's go ahead and begin. Now I'm just going to be going down the line and reintroducing some points and making some new points of my own. You can tag this first point as poverty is a choice. Again, poverty is a choice. Now Joshua actually agreed to this in cross-examination. He agreed that opportunity exists for everyone. And while it might be harder for the poor people, it still exists. You see, the fact of the matter is that rich people aren't simply rich because they have more opportunity. They're rich because they have the ambition, the hard work, and the talent to use that opportunity. You see, poverty is a choice. And sometimes while people can be born into poverty, staying in that poverty and not working hard enough to get out of it is a choice. So by providing opportunity, it doesn't actually lessen the economic gap between the rich and poor. With that said, I like to go to my second point, which you can tag as collapse of economies equals collapse of life. Again, collapse of economies equals collapse of life. Now this links to what I talked about in my first contention. But to explain this a little bit better, I like to bring up some evidence. Now according to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Venezuelan government under Hugo Chavez and later Nicolas Maduro tried to lessen the wealth gap by raising taxes on the rich, nationalizing private businesses, and redistributing wealth to poorer citizens. At first, people received more benefits, but when the government kept taking money and property from businesses to continue closing the gap, companies shut down, investors left, and productivity collapsed. Within a decade, Venezuela went from one of the richest countries in Latin America to one of the poorest. The government printed money to keep paying benefits, causing hyperinflation, unemployment, food shortages, and millions of citizens fleeing the country. You see, the fact of the matter is that poverty will always exist. Inequality exists in every country, and that's because it's not something that the government can control. And when the government makes an effort to control this, it actually just makes the economy worse, because inequality is what keeps the economy running. People seeking more money is what keeps the economy running. So let's say this. Let's say the government were to start giving money to people to help them in their situations when they're in poverty. Now, they start relying on the government, and because of this, they have no need to get a job or innovate or come up with new ideas. Now, with no one innovating, creating businesses, or creating industries, then the economy starts to collapse because who's keeping the economy running? Transactions aren't being made, businesses aren't being run, and sooner or later, the economy will collapse. You see, inequality has to exist. An incentive for working harder has to exist. And that's why rich people exist. And that leads me to my third and final point. Opportunity doesn't lessen the gap. Again, opportunity doesn't lessen the gap. Now, I've said this multiple times, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but providing equal opportunity does not lessen the gap. The government would have to directly give money to the rich and poor to actually lessen the gap. By giving people opportunity, it doesn't lessen the gap because opportunity requires a choice. And by choosing to be in poverty while opportunity still exists, doesn't solve the issue. I think we can see that opportunity to become richer will always exist, even in the US and other countries. And I think we can see that although opportunity exists, it doesn't solve the issue. So why will giving them more opportunity solve the issue? It's because inequality isn't a result of better opportunity or being born into a better household. It's a result of ambition, hard work, and talent. Now, I like to go to one more point. I'm sorry, I know I said that was my last point, but I have one more. And you can tag this point as the value clash. Again, the value clash. Now, what it really comes down to in this debate is whose value is more important. Joshua tried to respond to my value and say that it isn't relevant to the resolution because life isn't being harmed. But I showed you in my second point in the speech that if an economy collapses, then life collapses. And so life is at stake if we allow governments to lessen the gap between the rich and poor. And with that said, life is obviously the utmost priority. And while economic justice is important, if these two things were to come into clash, we would always have to choose life, because economic justice comes after life. It exists for life. And I'm not saying economic justice isn't something that we should uphold, but what I am saying is that life is more important. Just to summarize all of this up, it's my contention that opportunity doesn't actually solve the issue. Therefore, Joshua's whole case is not relevant to the resolution, as he actually hasn't shown how this opportunity does lessen the gap between the rich and poor. And that my value of life should be upheld over Joshua's value of economic justice. And that finally, by siding with the affirmative side, then economies collapse. I think we need to look at one simple fact. Countries, like I showed, have tried to lessen the gap between the rich and poor, but it never turns out good. Inequality exists in every country, so surely it exists for a reason. And it's because everything I'm saying is true. Thank you.